Eh? Ngicabanga yenza utshela ngenkonzo.
Yeah, we'll start with the
Sithethe
prayer today.
sithethe ngisele ngo-public protector ukuthi
By people just
we utshilo kaloku uthi njalo.
okay. I'm looking now.
Ayisabi awisabi inantsika iwenza wena.
How are you, Ethel?
I'm fine, and you?
You
You are looking very summery today. Sure.
and then we're like in two continents.
Nanawe, Nana.
Yabo ilesaba. Right.
Let me tell you, is everybody here? Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. We've just had our first federal council in the sixth administration of South Africa after the elections, and it's good to be here. And as you know, federal council is the highest decision-making body outside of the elective Congress. So we had a very good weekend, and without much ado, let me hand over to our leaders. Let me introduce Ethel Trollip, our federal chairperson, Mmusi, our leader, James, our federal council chair, and over to you, leader, to just give us the highlights of the weekend and a couple of other things that the party would like to give out to South Africans today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, fellow South Africans. This weekend, the Federal Council of the DA met to consider the plan, to reflect on the elections, and to focus on the future of the organization. I want to say, I think the absolute tribute to the DA is that the spirit with which the meeting was conducted was one where views were expressed, but it was expressed on the basis of the fact that these are South Africans who are committed to building an organization. And the ultimate thing is that actually the DA is the party that reflects one South Africa for all, because sitting in the room were South Africans from all walks of life who are bound together by values of freedom, fairness, and opportunity and diversity, committed to the future of this country. And I think it's a great tribute to the strength of the organization that even with the diversity of citizens in the room, we could walk out united by the mission to build one South Africa for all. And therefore the spirit of the weekend was good, it was collegial, it was strong, and I think the organization emerges better as a function of the Federal Council. Equally so, the party, in looking a month on from elections, reflected on a number of things. We're very clear that South Africa's economy is in difficulty. Just under 10 million citizens cannot find work. Our economy is growing at lower rates. It was very clear that Federal Council took note of the biggest decline of our economy and contracting of 3.2%. It is going to be important that if South Africans are going to have an economy that grows, that creates economic opportunities for our citizens, that we focus on giving policy certainty. As the DA, we believe the mandate of the Reserve Bank is correct, as expressed in our Constitution, and ultimately that the stability of our currency has to be protected, and therefore the challenge with South Africa is not our monetary policy, but rather our fiscal policy. Therefore, a debate on quantitative easing is misplaced and wrong. We don't support that view. We believe that South Africa ought to be focusing itself on its fiscal policy to make the appropriate adjustments that need to be made. Therefore, we will be looking at where we are in government. How do we ensure that we cut down expenses? We ensure that actually fiscally we become more prudent so that we can invest in the appropriate infrastructure for economic growth. And therefore we will maintain that our stance must remain in the independence of the Reserve Bank, and that remains sacrosanct. We will be tabling in Parliament our agenda for reform, and therefore in the next 100 days, the DA, both in Parliament, legislatures and governments, will be focused on how we bring change. Furthermore, we'll be tabling our jobs bill and cheaper energy bill, which is a legislative reform that looks to stabilize ESCOM and ensures that we can deliver consistent energy so that our economy can be run on a strong energy backbone and deliver the economic growth that we need. In turning to the elections, the DA equally so reflected on the elections. There can be no debate that these were not the outcomes that the DA wanted. It was certainly for us disappointing as a party, and I, as leader of the DA, have taken the responsibility for the outcomes and the project that we're leading. It's very clear that I think the hope for South Africa is born on what the DA is trying to achieve, which is to build this one South Africa for all. And this is a fight that we will continue to have. We will not be detracted by moving to the right or to the left. We have to keep the organization as the rightful occupants of the center of our politics, and therefore reject in any forms of nationalism and forms of populism that occur on either side. None of us never want to see voters leave our party, and therefore Federal Council had to consider strongly how do we regain not only the votes that we've lost but grow further from here, but also along with that, how do we ensure that we build that center with more South Africans. And therefore it is still our commitment and my commitment to continue to build a diverse, non-racial center based on these values. This we believe is the future of the DA. Along with that, for us to achieve those objectives, that the party endorsed an independent organizational review that we've put on the table. This review has to ensure that the DA becomes a party that will now move into the future and how political parties work all over the world. So it's important that not only is it independent, but it also will initiate a series of change that will take place in the organization. It will focus on building a constitutional liberal democratic alternative to the current government, review and investigate underlying drivers of the party's performance in the general elections, and will also encompass the capacity of party leadership, public representatives, political identity, policy platform, strategy, structure, processes, and operation, as well as other considerations that may be relevant in achieving the party's objectives. It will commence its work earnestly from this week, and it will conclude the report at the next Federal Council, which will be on the 19th and 20th of October this year. I have requested for Ryan Kutsia, who used to be the former CEO of the DA, but someone with international experience and has worked in other parts of the world in different political infrastructure, to chair the body as an external member, and therefore also there will be a lot that will focus on the internal operations of the party. I want to say that input will be expected from all members of the DA, but furthermore, the very respective structures will be able to present their findings as to where the party is going. The report will then be tabled at the next Federal Council in October with all the appropriate considerations that go from there. I've also, along with that, initiated a growth and redress policy commission, which will also be doing work on looking at how do we best grow our economy, what policy platforms do we put on the table, and also ensure that we achieve the objectives of redress, making sure all South Africans are included in our economy. As many of us would know, in this month, we reflect deeply on the role that young people play in our country. The struggle, really, as those that were started by people like Hector Peterson, is being continued today, except the struggle today, not only is it about the quality of education of citizens, but it's the opportunities that we present to young people. 50% of our youth are unemployed, and in this Youth Month, it becomes important that we communicate and speak to young people about how do we get them work opportunities, but also improve on the quality of education in this regard. And our governments will be taking further work in this regard. We've set targets for 2021. The party will be targeting the metros that we are in government in, and we want to be able to govern outright. But along with that, the party also must govern well and deliver more for its citizens. Federal Council applied its mind to how we improve governance. How do we ensure that the governance unit that the DA has is capacitated better to interact with the governments and citizens in this regard? It is with that in mind that we've asked that there be political headship of that particular unit. We'll be strengthening it so that it interacts better with governments. I have requested and had a long conversation with James Self, who has been the chair of our Federal Executive and Federal Council, to head up that particular unit. This begins a change of role for James, who has chaired our party and our Federal Council and our Federal Executive for the last 19 years with great skill and absolute competence. The party has an incredible privilege of being able to work with James. He has been at the forefront of our litigation when it comes to issues such as Nkandla and the spy tapes. And ultimately, as a stalwart of this organization, James remains in our party, will head up the governance unit, and will step down from the chair of Federal Executive in October at that next Federal Council. And James has done an incredible job and an honorable one for our organization. And the fortunes of the DA going towards 2021 then become absolutely vital in ensuring that our governments work well. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, it is not debated that where the DA is in government, no money is stolen, and that we will be focused on improving services and making sure that our objective is always that we can be in governments that create work for citizens. This is the future of this country, and coming out of this Federal Council, I feel the organization is focused more. It will focus on those objectives of 2021, and election 2021 for us will kick off in August as earnestly as possible, where our governments are at work and our public reps are there. I'm going to give James a moment, and then from then on, we'll then proceed from there.
Thank you very much indeed, Mmusi, and members of the media. As Mmusi mentioned, I have been the chairperson of the Federal Council of the DP and the DA. As Mmusi has mentioned, I've been the chairperson of the DA's Federal Council and Federal Executive for 19 and a bit years. It's been a great experience. I was privileged to work with Tony Leon, with Helen Ziller, and with Mmusi Maimane. I've seen this party grow from a 9% party to over a 20% party. We had a very small caucus. We've now got a very big caucus. We've moved from being an opposition party to being a party of government. Each of these has come with new challenges and new matters that we have had to get our head around. But it has been a great privilege to have served in that way. And I really would like to pay tribute not only to the leaders, but also to all the members of the Federal Council and the Federal Executive who've assisted me, to my deputies, and to my Chief of Staff. So it really has been a great journey, and I look forward to the new challenge that I have been given, which is to ensure that our governments deliver, that they deliver according to our manifesto, that they communicate their successes, and that they are in sync and in synergy with our political programs. So thank you very much indeed for the privilege, Mmusi, and I look forward to taking up the new challenge.
I think the only remark I'd like to make is obviously many of you would have, thank you James, but also the events around the Public Protector. The Public Protector has a very, as we've read reports today about the report that has been leaked, let us acknowledge the fact that this Public Protector, we as a party didn't vote for her in Parliament because we challenged her fitness to hold office. But her role has got nothing to do with whether I think the individual in the office is fit or not. She is constitutionally obligated to in fact table a report on my complaint on President Ramaphosa and his son, and whether President Ramaphosa misled Parliament or not. And therefore, I urge and urgently will request that she tables that report. As the complainant, I deserve to get the report so that we can ensure that accountability is effective. Thank you. Thank you, Vika.
Thank you very much. I'm going to limit questions to 5. If I can ask your name, media house which you represent, and then we'll take all 5 questions and respond accordingly. Thank you. If I can have the questions, please. Okay, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we can close it. Oh, and the last one. Not acknowledged you. You're number 2, 3, 4, and the lady at the back. Thank you. That's it. Thank you. If you have a question, please.
Oh, hi. Well, my Fulani from DWN. Mmusi Maimane, when you say this body that is appointed to look at the DA, how will it construct it? What's the main focus you'll be focusing on to try to get it up? It will be, I don't know, we're trying to understand the workings of that, but how will it constitute?
Sure. Okay.
Hmm?
You?
The body seems to be looking at, when you're saying about the review that you did on elections, you seem, from what you're saying, seem to have been looking inwardly. If you think about looking, what was about issues of sentiment, the sentiment that the electorate might have had towards the party, to maybe to some of the tweets that your leaders have had. Did you look at that and it could be what was your view?
Oh, thank you. Muluku from ENCA. I just want to find out whether, seeing that he's going to be taking a certain role, whether you do have any plans for someone like Helen Sia. If I'm not wrong, she's the only person who will be thing of the province. One would assume that she possibly has some wealth of experience. What role in the future do you anticipate she will play in the party fight? In today's City Press, there's a report that says apparently there's a process to discipline her for the controversial tweets that she's been tweeting. Is that true? Can you confirm that? But also that particular report attributes remarks that you apparently made in that council meeting that some of the leaders of the DA during council last week publicly criticized the very same government of the DA and apparently expressed your view despite that. But some people would say, if indeed you express unhappiness, they would say you are trying to thwart dissent. You are trying to say you can be challenged as a party by even members of your own party.
Thank you.
Just to add on to my other questions about Helen Gill, she recently wrote a column in a column of newspaper which said that one of the DA's election strategies was to partial strategy in order for you to diffuse the image of being a white party. It's very interested to actually hear what the strategy of the right party is.
What is the position again that is going to be taken up after in October, and in terms of legislation, have there been a number of people that you think could possibly be taken?
So that's it, right? Covered. Thank you so much. Bonga, what I want the review to do is, remember that the DA is the only alternative for South Africa, in my view. It is the party that occupies the center. What we've got to do is recognize that the DA is reflecting on 2 elections. We had an election in 2016, now in government. We have an election in 2019. So there are functions of growth that have to say the DA as the only alternative for South Africa, how do we not only transition it as the Liberal Democratic Party for its future? How do we ensure that the policies are aligned with that? How do we ensure that the people are capacitated to execute against that mandate? How do we ensure that our governments operate well? So it's not just even reflecting just only on election results, because that's easy to do. But how do we, as that alternative, ensure that the party grows and grows higher? We are not trying to just regain. We are trying to grow higher. We believe we are the future of this country, and we need to be the government of this country. We believe that our policies, our principles are right. We believe that we'll stabilize the economy, create the conditions that are appropriate for our people to find work, and therefore our citizens, we've got to go out and work with ensuring that that message goes through to citizens. So that's the focus. And it has to deal with both external components to be able to, because you know, when you do a review of this nature, you want external players to be able to give input into that, and the panel will have a few members with it. It will go across the various provinces, the various structures to give feedback onto it. That report a report itself doesn't change the organization. There's an internal process inside the party to ensure that change occurs. That's the process. And I think, so to your question, it isn't just looking at, when you do polling, you look at various aspects. You look at what the external reports look like. You look at what voter sentiment is like. But also we mustn't deny the fact that this election takes place in a climate of fear. Don't deny the fact that South Africans are worried. I am worried. Imagine if you have a child who goes to university and cannot find a job. It's a fear. Imagine when South Africans are seeing things on social media that delegitimizes them on the basis of their race. There's a fear. So I think what we've got to do is turn people's fears into the hopes of what this country can look like. So this review will assess both an external climate and internal climate. And those who have asked me the question about the review about public representatives, I think that is just one component of my input. The organization, of course, like in any other organization, you have to exercise the appropriate discipline, make sure people are speaking about your own message going forward, and ensure that we, not only is it on social media or in any other platform, but that people go out and communicate a message of hope. So Moloko, you asked me questions about looking at public representatives. In an organization that transitions from opposition to government, there's sometimes muscle memory that people have. Now you've got to help them understand how do they better communicate government successes. And so for me, the message to the party is the DA in Joburg, the DA in Tshwane, the DA in Cape Town, and up until a while in Nelson Mandela Bay was doing some great work. Our people must be able to amplify that message. We must be better at meeting residents and communicating to them. And remember, we've inherited in Joburg an 18 billion rands loss of money due to corruption. Now, we are not going to change Joburg from the number of years that the ANC has been in government there to now suddenly the DA over 2 years turning everything around. Therefore, we have to educate voters better. We have to speak about it. It doesn't help when DA people also don't understand necessarily what the work of government is. We've got to be better at communicating government. And I will certainly, in looking, that's why I think James's new role is there, as someone who will head up the governance unit, seeks precisely to achieve that. It seeks to precisely help us communicate our government successes. But not only, you don't talk about successes in isolation. You also talk about them on the basis of, here's the DA's manifesto. I think voters have a contract with governments. They elect you with a contract. And after 5 years, you need to be able to tell them, this was the contract, this is what we wanted to achieve, go ahead and test us against that. If we say we're not going to steal your money, are there clean audits? If we say we're going to put a job in every home, how far are we made in that? If we say we're going to deliver services, basic services, how well is that being done? So these become crucial not only about communications, but about the DA's ideology, philosophy. We don't govern like the ANC. The ANC believes the state must be at the center of government. We believe that we must interact with citizens because they are best equipped to create wealth. It's not, and I think what we've got to do is distinguish the differences between what we've had in the last 20 odd years and what the DA wants to bring going forward. and compare apples for apples. Say to yourself, here where the DA governs in the Western Cape, what does it look like? Have things improved? What are the indicators? Here where the ANC governs, what are the contrasts there? So I think we've got to demonstrate to South Africans that there is in fact a difference. It's not just a better version of something. We want to change this country, we want to change the government, and we want to change how the government works. That's what the DA has got to do. And as far as Helen Zille is an ordinary member of the DA. And therefore, that matter is at that point, and we will communicate with her officially as to the questions about discipline.
Now, you can ask one question about the campaign against Helen.
Genuinely, she's an ordinary member of the party.
So there was no campaign at the public.
Where?
To the contrary, actually, she was involved in the campaign right up until the end of the campaign. So if she was being crushed out of the campaign, she wouldn't have been participating. Helen Zille participated and promoted the DA across the country. She was an integral part of our campaign. And she was a premier for 12 years, and prior to that she was the mayor, and she was the leader of this party. She's held prominent roles throughout this party, and James Self made reference to that. It was a pleasure working and a privilege working with her. Helen Zille has had a distinguished career in the DA, but she is now an ordinary member, and she will choose what role she'll play in the party as an ordinary member. She was involved in the campaign. She was not squeezed out of the campaign.
Can I just say on the question about the replacement of James, remember part of the review is to make sure the role that this is, it must be reflected on to make sure that we know what type of role it will play. The organization is much bigger. In fact, it got to a point where it was, for James, he can tell you himself, it's hard work doing all of that alone. And we have a few deputies in that place, and so their roles must be clarified. So the review's job is to make sure that we don't just look at person, we look at the role before we can preempt what the replacement must look like, etc. So I think if you allow us the space to deal with the review, we'll be able to decide how the role will work there.
Can I just make two comments? First of all, with regards to James Self, we experienced an extraordinary experience, and it was emotional for James. There was a standing ovation for a long, long time in recognition for what he was contributing to this party. Last night I described him as being the equivalent to a vital organ of the Democratic Alliance, and I want to thank him as well for that work. And just in light of your question, Moloko, this weekend, nobody was stifled from asking any questions of this leadership. In fact, we had frank, forthright discussions about how we're going to grow this party and how we're going to do things better. So the story you referred to in the newspaper couldn't be further from the truth. We had long, in-depth, frank discussions, and nobody was stifled from raising any matter of concern.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Guys, thank you so much. Guys, the leadership, some members have planes to catch, so I don't want them to miss planes. Thank you very much.
So we can't even do a one-on-one with any of them.
I don't know if who's available, but I know James and Ethel definitely have to disappear.
Yeah, we have